On the agenda tonight, we're taking a look at another featured artist under the spotlight. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to episode 2 of Under the Spotlight. If you do enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit that notification bell to make sure that you don't miss a future episode. So, tonight we are going to be joined by James Bell, who is from Staffordshire here in the UK. He's an independent musician, multi-instrumentalist, vocalist, songwriter and producer of all his own original material. He's a previous winner of the Young Guitarist of the Year award, as voted for by Guitarist magazine. He also won the Nickelodeon Rising Music Star Award and worked with the likes of Maroon 5 and Leona Lewis. Sadly, 4 years ago, James contracted a very rare and debilitating form of meningitis, which he still has to fight on a daily basis, but despite this, he continues to push forward, creating new songs and albums, with his latest rock album released just 2 days ago on the 7th of May, which is James's birthday. He's released 4 albums so far in 2021 alone. The links to James's album and YouTube channel are in the description below. I've also included a link to James's Patreon page, as personally I think this guy is deserving of any and all support possible, so head over there if you can. So without further ado, let's get James up on screen, and a quick note before we do that. Unfortunately, we've had to sacrifice James's guitar face in order to get the fretwork in shot, but it's something we're going to have to deal with. It's absolutely fine because it's all about looking at what James is laying down on that fretboard. It's all about the playing here. So let's get James up on screen. Let's see what he has in store for us as he goes under the spotlight. And there we have it. So, just a quick word on what we've just witnessed. We've got a solo that is so melodic. There's such a journey in there from beginning to end, but let me mention that this is just insane level of technique that we can see from James. Just the run at the end. We are going to get the guitar out, of course, and jump into it, but there is so much in this solo that I could be looking at it for years, but we'll do our best just to get a little bit of a handle on what James is doing here, but also just highlight some of this fantastic technique. The first thing that I want to mention is that you don't even have to play the guitar to get an appreciation of the journey that we go on here, because you can just see it. When we start out with the beginning here, you can see how the hand is towards the middle of the guitar. By the end of the solo, we've gone all the way up the fretboard, which means that we're ascending in pitch. So we're getting that gradual journey. You'll find this with all of the best players. They make a journey out of their solos, and they very rarely ever just stay in the same place. And especially considering that this solo is just over a minute in length, which, if you're thinking about any song, where there's a guitar solo, that is a very long solo, and it's testament to how interesting the playing is and the journey is that you're interested in it the whole time. We're going to be in pentatonic shape 1 here, but you want to start, once you've got used to that shape, you want to start extending it a little bit by finding the notes. That's our pentatonic shape 1 in this major shape because we're in C, and you want to start extending, as James does here, that shape. So rather than going, you can see how just sliding up on that G string rather than going over to the B, just having a pick and a delayed slide makes it so much more interesting and gives it a little bit of personality rather than just going straight over. It's a totally different way of playing exactly the same notes, and that's the great thing. So let's just listen to this first section again. So we've got this bend, a little bit of vibrato at the top of the bend there, going back down to where we started on that D. And then we're just ascending, and if I'm playing that on the B string, that's where those notes would be again. Just major scale here, but it's not about the notes, it's how you play them. So once you've gone through to first bit of technique here, which is really subtle, and it's this sweep across the 3 strings that we get on our 5th fret, and you're just barring down your first finger here. You might want to roll that first finger to keep the strings muted and the notes a little bit cleaner, but we've got this, that's the sound before we then get into that little finger. So we've got that kind of sound. So it's really subtle, but it's such top technique that it's thrown in so quickly, but you can hear those notes really clearly. So once you get into that, and then into the melody, and you'll find that throughout this solo, James is applying bends and hitting those pitches dead on with the bends, but then also applying a really quick mute. So as soon as he's hit that pitch, it then cuts out. The other thing to mention is the way that James is applying this vibrato between these phrases. There's not a lot of time to fit it in there, so it is quite fast, but it makes all the difference to getting the notes to sound full of personality and to get that expression out. So when we get this, that kind of speed, just those little wobbles, kind of like that. When we go into the next phrase, we've got this. So a little jump from that D string over to the G, and it sounds like we've got a little hint of that pinched harmonic in there. It's really subtle, but I did pick up on that a little bit in there. And we've got a little slide, I believe, at that point as well. And it's actually a bend. I just want to point out something really quickly about this particular phrase that we're about to listen to. We've now got a variation on the first melody that we were hearing, because when we have this bend, we've gone all the way up to that high E string and 7th fret. Whereas we haven't gone that high previously, and it's a different line, it's a response to the first lines that we were hearing, where we go or with a little bend. So we haven't gone that high, it's a great little response, and when we get that, we then have this really cool little bluesy rundown. I think that was it. I'm just going to have a quick listen. There it is. Super cool, super smooth across the fretboard as well. That's really what you take from this solo. Like I said, just crazy technique. But when we've got that, does that little slide and then hammer on. There's lots of really subtle hammer-ons going on here that just add to that dynamic. Like I mentioned in the first episode with Buck Dharma, the appreciation of dynamics when you're playing a solo, we've definitely got that here. But let's jump into the next phrase. Okay, really cool line there again. We've got this. I think that was it. And there's so much dynamic change in there with the palm mute on the right hand. So rather than going and being really aggressive, we've got that little bit of palm mute in there. Like that. Let me just have another little listen, make sure that those notes are roughly what we've got. And then we get into a really cool bend. So it's all about the technique here. So smooth across that fretboard. Just a quick word on the technique of bending and tapping. Your bends have got to be spot on, and your taps have got to be spot on as well. If you're applying vibrato with that right hand, again, another technique you're going to have to work on. And this solo is so full of technique. So when we've got this, that kind of thing, we go back down to our fretted position with the left hand and tap on to the 14th fret, let it go down, and then have that little pull off with that right hand. So if your bends aren't right there, if we're going and then I go and I push too high, even though you can maybe try and get away with it, but it's not going to sound very good because there are so many wrong places that you can go with a bend. But let's jump back into it. Okay, so jumping into this next phrase, we're really moving on now with the solo into that second half, and we're ascending. We've got this little run. Sounds kind of like that. Little bend there with a pull off. And then we've got this top technique, little run up. It might be that kind of thing. Or it might be, I'm going to have another little look at it to see where James is with his fingering. Okay, so we've got this little jump up. Again, 3 notes per string here in terms of getting that speed. It takes a lot of practice to get it as fast as James is doing it, but it's this. And then ending with that third finger. I think James might have been playing that with the little finger, but this is the other thing that we'll find later on. James has got this ability to further down the neck have that full tone stretch and then stretch over 2 tones. So it's quite a stretch. I've got smaller hands, so I'll be maybe editing a little bit of playing as we go, but again here, top technique, starting the second half of the solo, because now we're visiting somewhere that we've never been before, so it's just going to be interesting again to visit another site. Let's jump back into it. Okay, so again, same theme here that we've already had, but an octave higher, slightly different expression here. We're cutting off the notes a little bit more. So when we're going here, we're starting on, the 15th fret high E string. We've got this. And really cutting off the notes here, making them really short. And we've got this. Again, really cool. Pull off there. Just so much from a dynamic point of view in this solo, but all of these bends are so spot on from James that you just get an ability to sit back, relax, listen to it, and not have to question any of the technique because it's all faultless, and you can just hear those bends right on pitch the whole time, and they are expressive, especially when we've got this little more of a bluesy sound rather than going all major and going really high up, which is going to sound a little bit happier. This little little bit more understated, a little bit more bluesy. So really cool sound. Let's jump in again. Okay, right, so we've got another little sweep here. And then we went into a bend, so we had this exactly the same as we have the octave below, but now it's going to be slightly different in terms of the fingering, same notes, but... and then into the bend. And those notes are going to follow each other really quickly. So we've got this... you want to try and get those 3 notes in before the bend. It's exactly what James is doing here. Again, spot on technique in order to hear those notes into that bend. Let's see where we go after this. Okay, so then we had the same thing. Oh, we went all the way up to our 19th fret here. So that was quite a jump and super fast. I think if you've got bigger hands, you'll obviously be able to make that transition a lot faster with that little finger, because your little finger, if you've got bigger hands, will be a lot closer to the final destination. You don't have to move your whole hand to get there. But I would go and play that in terms of getting that same sweep, but super fast across the fretboard here. Okay, really cool run. The thing to take away from this is the way that James is inserting speed and technique, but he's not doing it all the time. It's not overkill. So by the time you get to a little run like we just had there, it's fresh and it just sounds cool. It's not oversaturated because you've heard it so much before. These little runs, the little dashing of technique is always going to make your playing more interesting because you're throwing something different at your listener rather than just playing the same way the whole time. You want to have a solo that just ebbs and flows, isn't a constant speed the whole time. You want to be speeding up, slowing down, speeding up, slowing down, maintaining, then slowing down, and just hitting with different rhythms all the time. As we said on that first episode, don't hit the beats of a bar all the time. Just flow around those beats to begin with, and then when you go back to them, that'll sound interesting as well. So let's take that back, have a little listen to this run that James is playing, and we'll attempt to get down something relatively similar. Okay, so we've got this. And then we had a little bend. We actually played the notes. It was that kind of thing. And I don't think it sounded like it was all alternate picked, but the... oh, that was probably pretty close. I might have actually fluked it there. Let's just jump into it again. Really cool line there. And then again, really cool bending. Okay, and we have a little slide here. I think we started. Did we go down? Oh, there's a little hammer-on in there. Maybe. Like that, because it looked like James didn't move before that final hammer on. So let's have a listen to the very last section. And there we have it. So this little rundown, it's not the end of the solo yet, but we've got this, what sounds like... and all downstrokes here from James in this section, by the way. And we've got this... and it's not really clean in terms of it's been played intentionally like this. James is muting on that D string. So we get this... almost like a ghost note in there. And then we get... and again, he is, I think, jumping over to the G there. So we have this... but... and you can't really hear that G. You're really only aware of the... that little rundown. So all of that together, it means that because of the muted D string that we have going in there to begin with, we're going to have this kind of ghost note sound to it. And you're only really aware of. So it just shows exactly how James is using technique to make it interesting and just to throw in notes that you can't quite hear, but you know there's something else in there. Just a little percussive sound in the background, moving it along. It is real subtleties of technique here, but that's exactly what James is doing throughout this solo, but also in this little section, having a little rundown, because he's now just having an understated rundown to the final run, which is going to melt our faces. And there we have it. So you're not going to be surprised to hear that I'm not going to break that rundown, because there's way too many notes in there and it would take me years, and this video would go on for another few years. We will have another look just at this end rundown. We're not going to be going through all the notes, but just to maybe take away some concepts of playing runs, if you're looking to speed up your playing and you do play lead guitar yourselves, we'll jump into it and then explain a little bit about it afterwards. And there we have it. Just insane technique on that rundown. But it sounds like the little line we have. There is a little line before we actually start the run. But then we're into our... We actually had this shape earlier, and these aren't going to be exactly the same notes. I haven't been through it and worked it all out. But we've got this approach of... that kind of thing. And when you start throwing this together, I think there are... that kind of thing, that... And it does sound like we get that little repeat on a few of the notes, and this will be happening throughout the whole run as we descend, going into that... that kind of thing. So... and it will keep on going the same way as we descend, like that. And as we do descend, you might see here how I'm playing 3 notes per string, but here there are a few little pull-offs there on that high E string, and you can start to see a little bit of a theme. The important thing to point out from a technique perspective is that we're going to be using, for example, here, first finger, third finger, little finger. I know that I played it like that to begin with, but if you're just starting out, then you might want to use that third finger, little finger in order to start throwing it together. But as we then descend, you can see how now it's first finger, second finger, little finger. And that formation, those 2 formations are basically most of what you're going to need. We do actually go down, and you can see the way that James, he's got this 2-tone stretch, which is something I mentioned a very long time ago in this video about having the hand size and the stretch to be able to do that. So when he gets into that 2-tone stretch, he then continues, and now he's doing this 2-tone stretch on the low E string and the A string. This is something that when you are playing really fast, you want to make sure that your fingers are in position already, especially if you're doing pull-offs, because you can't pull the string off to nothing. So for example, if I'm going and I do a pull-off, my second finger's there. If it's not there, it's going to pull off to an open string. And you might be able to see when I'm playing, because I've got small hands, first of all, the third finger. I tend to use my second finger as I ascend higher, and I don't really gain anything using my third finger there, because you can see my little finger wants to naturally come down on the 6th fret. So in order to try and get that in position, you can see how I've got to change the angle of my wrist, and from your angle from the camera you can see how that isn't going to be healthy for me to play guitar for many years into the future. So my hand just isn't big enough, unfortunately, to get those kind of stretches in. But I don't want this video to go on for too long, because it will turn into a bit of a guitar lesson. The thing to mention is that if you do have small hands and you think, oh, I'm never going to be able to play fast on the guitar, don't worry, because you can navigate your way around a stretch like that by going and just arranging it so that you go down to your A string a little bit earlier. You can see now I can now play the same notes without having to stretch. This series is all about just playing like yourself and trying not to copy anybody, because once you start copying someone, you can imagine being shown a run and you physically cannot play it because of your physiology. You weren't born with the same hands. So whenever you're trying to play a particular run or watching another guitarist play and you're struggling to do what they do, just realize that everyone's different and you won't be able to get the same stretch as some other players, but there's always a way around it. You can start tapping in notes. That's the great thing about that kind of thing there, because you can tap in that note. If you can't reach it, just use the right hand. And I mean, I really like tapping and the legato sound of it, as people will know if you've checked out my music and seen videos of me playing, and I think it's because it lends itself to my own physiology. So I'm focusing on the techniques that I know I can do and I know that I can improve with, rather than forcing myself to do stretches, which is going to sacrifice my ability to play in the long term because of wrist injuries and wrist issues, but just playing the most efficient way for your own physiology. It's just the case here that James is playing the most efficient way for his physiology, and he's just throwing these runs together with perfect technique. And we also end on the C at the bottom. But when we're looking at a guy like James, you don't get the award of Young Guitarist of the Year from Guitarist Magazine without being pretty good. And James is definitely very, very good, just technically on a totally different level, just nailing the solo, but it's also piecing it together with melody, because a lot of players fall into that trap of just being technical and not really having an appreciation of throwing that together with melody in a solo. And that's something that James is great at doing. And he's also been working on songwriting since his illness and not being able to do as much as he could previously. He's worked on different parts of being an overall artist, and a lot of guitarists do miss out on that as well. They're just focused on techniques rather than writing songs, rather than singing and composing and writing something that is melodic, not only on the guitar but a whole composition. But check out James on YouTube and check out his Patreon page as well. All the links are going to be in the description below, in order to head over to James's channel and be able to interact with him, send him a message. A big thank you to James for sending in this video, for going under the spotlight for us to take a look at and just enjoy his technique and his solo. But thank you guys for watching tonight. If you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!